A widowed father, Mark, decides to take his estranged daughter, Lena, and her husband on a long-overdue family vacation at a luxurious coastal hotel. He hopes to reconnect and heal old wounds. But what begins as a peaceful trip turns into a cruel humiliation when Lena, influenced by greed and pride, demands her father give up his hotel room and sleep outside because it's her family's turn now. Crushed and betrayed, Mark sleeps by the pool under the stars until the hotel manager, a quiet, observant woman named Rachel, notices him. What she uncovers over the next few days exposes a shocking web of deceit, greed, and moral decay. By the end, justice arrives poetic and devastating, and the father, once humiliated, walks away with his dignity, leaving his daughter to face the consequences of her cruelty. The call came on a quiet Sunday morning, the kind of morning where the house feels too large, too still, and the only sound is the tick of the old clock on the kitchen wall. I was sitting by the window nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold when my phone buzzed across the table. For a second, I didn't recognize the number, but when I saw the name Lena, my heart stuttered. It had been months since I'd heard her voice. My only daughter. My only family left after her mother passed away 5 years ago. I hesitated before answering. There's a special kind of silence that follows long estrangement, a silence filled with questions you're afraid to ask. Still, I pressed the green button. "Dad?" she said, her tone light, practiced. "How are you?" I swallowed, forcing a smile even though she couldn't see it. "I'm okay, honey. Just taking things slow these days." "That's good. Listen, Chris and I were thinking," she began, and I could already hear the faint hum of her husband's voice in the background. "We're planning a vacation next week. You know, just to get away, and we thought maybe you could come along." For a moment, I didn't believe I'd heard her right. Lena, my daughter, who barely returned my messages, who skipped Thanksgiving, who once told me I made things awkward, was inviting me to go on vacation with her. She went on, words flowing fast, filling the awkward space between us. "It'll be good for you, Dad. You've been alone too long. The place is nice right on the coast. A bit pricey, but Chris got a deal through his company. Just say yes, okay?" My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to ask why now. Why after all this time? But another part, the foolish, fatherly part, was just grateful to hear her voice again. "I'd love that," I said quietly. She laughed, relieved. "Perfect. I'll text you the details. Don't worry about anything, just bring yourself." When the call ended, I sat there for a while, staring at the empty chair across from me, the one where her mother used to sit. I could almost hear her voice saying, "She'll come around, Mark, just be patient." Maybe this was it. Maybe Lena was finally coming around. The next few days were filled with small, nervous preparations. I hadn't traveled in years. I pulled my old suitcase from the closet, brushed off the dust, and packed with care. A few shirts, my best pair of trousers, a clean shave kit. I even stopped by the barbershop, the same one I'd gone to for 30 years, and asked for a trim. "You going somewhere fancy, Mark?" Old Harold joked as he snipped away. I smiled faintly. "Vacation. With my daughter." He raised his brows, impressed. "That's good, man. Family time, that's what life's about." I nodded, though something deep down ached. Family time. I'd missed that phrase. The day of the trip arrived gray and cool. I took the early train to the coast, watching the fields roll past the window. My reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered, lines carved deep around my eyes, hair more silver than brown. But beneath that, I felt hopeful. The hotel rose like a palace against the sea-white stone, tall windows, balconies draped with flowers. It looked like a place from another world. When I stepped into the lobby, my heart raced a little. I scanned the crowd until I saw her. Lena. She looked beautiful, elegant dress, gold earrings, a calm confidence that made her seem older than her 32 years. For a moment, I forgot the distance between us. I just saw my little girl again, the one who used to run down the beach clutching my hand. "Dad," she said, smiling, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Lena," I breathed, pulling her into a hug. She stiffened slightly before patting my back. Behind her stood Chris Tall, sharp-featured, dressed like a man who spent too much time thinking about appearances. He gave me a firm handshake, too firm, his smile polite but hollow. "Good to see you, sir," he said. "Good to see you too, Chris." There was a brief silence before Lena clapped her hands together. "Come on, Dad. Let's get you checked in." At the front desk, I noticed something strange. The receptionist glanced between our reservations and hesitated. "Mr. Sanders, you're in room 207, right?" Lena leaned forward quickly. "Oh, we're in 305. We just assumed my father's room would be next to ours. Could that be changed?" The receptionist frowned. "I'm afraid 305 and 307 are both taken, but 207 is still a lovely room, sir." "That's fine," I said, smiling. "I don't mind." Lena's eyes flickered with something annoyance, maybe embarrassment. "Okay then," she muttered. "We'll meet you later for dinner." She turned, walking away with Chris without looking back. As I followed the bellhop down the hall, I noticed how far my room was the very end of the west wing, overlooking the parking lot, not the ocean. Still, it was clean, comfortable, quiet. I unpacked carefully, setting my things in order, and stared at the single-framed photo I'd brought Lena as a child, sitting on her mother's shoulders. Dinner that evening felt off. Lena and Chris were dressed like magazine models, laughing loudly, ordering expensive wine. I tried to join in, asking simple questions about her work, her new house, the grandchildren I wished I had, but each question died quickly. She scrolled her phone between bites. Chris answered for her half the time. At one point, I mentioned how proud her mother would have been. Lena's fork paused mid-air. "Let's not talk about Mom right now," she said sharply. I lowered my gaze. "Of course." A few minutes later, Chris raised a toast to family. His smile was thin, ironic. Lena laughed, clinking glasses. I lifted mine too, though it felt hollow. Later, when the bill came, I instinctively reached for it, but Chris waved me off. "Don't worry, old man. We've got it. You've done enough already." His words stung, though I couldn't quite tell why. I forced a smile. "All right." Back in my room that night, I sat by the small window, listening to the ocean wind whistle through the gap in the glass. I wanted to believe this trip could still bring us closer, but something in Lena's eyes, cold, distracted, told me I was fooling myself. I thought about calling her mother's old number, even though it no longer worked, just to pretend someone was still listening. Instead, I opened my wallet and looked at the worn photo I kept there. Me, Lena, and her mom on the beach. I was holding Lena up in my arms. She was laughing, wild and free. When did that laughter turn into silence? I didn't have the answer. All I knew was that I was here now and I wasn't ready to give up on her yet. So I closed my eyes, whispered a small prayer that tomorrow might be better, and let the sound of the distant waves lull me to sleep. But deep down, something told me tomorrow would not bring peace. It would bring the beginning of humiliation I could never have imagined. Because I didn't know then that the daughter I had loved, the one I raised to be kind, would soon look me in the eyes and tell me to sleep outside like a stranger. And that night, as the waves crashed softly against the shore, I had no idea how far a father's heart could fall before it finally breaks. The next morning started with sunlight spilling through the curtains, warm, golden, and almost cruel in its beauty. For a moment, as I woke to the faint sound of waves crashing, I felt peace. The kind of peace I hadn't known in years. I sat up, stretched my stiff back, and smiled faintly at the thought of breakfast with Lena. Maybe today would be different. Maybe we'd laugh again like we used to, before life became complicated and sharp-edged. I took my time getting ready. A clean shirt, combed hair, a dab of the old cologne I'd saved from my wedding anniversary days. I looked at myself in the mirror, old, yes, but not broken. Not yet. When I reached the restaurant, Lena and Chris were already there, seated by the terrace overlooking the sea. Their plates were half empty, and their coffee cups nearly dry. "Morning," I said cheerfully, pulling out a chair. Lena glanced up briefly. "Oh, Dad, you're up." "We didn't want to wake you." Chris smirked over his cup. "Yeah, we figured you might want to rest. You know, old bones and all." I forced a chuckle. "I'm not that old, son." He just grinned and turned back to his phone. I waved to the waiter and ordered tea and toast. The silence that followed was thick. The only sounds were the distant gulls and the clatter of cutlery from other tables. "So," I tried, "what's the plan for today? Maybe we can visit that lighthouse I saw on the drive here. Your mother used to love those." Lena didn't look up. Actually, Dad, we're going out. Chris wants to check out the golf course. It's sort of our thing. I nodded, swallowing the sting. I see, then maybe later. Later. She finally looked at me, her voice softer but firm. Dad, this is supposed to be relaxing for everyone. Maybe you can take the shuttle into town, look around, get a massage or something? Her words were wrapped in politeness, but they cut deep. She was trying to be kind, yes, but it was the kind of kindness that kept distance. Sure, I said after a pause. I'll find something to do. She smiled faintly. Good, we'll meet for dinner, all right? I nodded again. As they stood to leave, Chris gave me a casual pat on the shoulder. Don't get lost out there, Pops. Then they were gone, their laughter fading as they disappeared through the glass doors. I spent the afternoon wandering the boardwalk alone. The sun burned overhead, and the air was thick with salt and sunscreen. Families walked by, children tugging at their parents' hands, couples sharing ice cream, old friends taking pictures. I tried to enjoy it. I really did. But every smile I saw only deepened the ache inside me. I stopped at a small seaside cafe and ordered a coffee. The waiter, a kind young man named Rafi, asked if I was visiting with family. My daughter, I said, smiling weakly. We're here for a short vacation. He grinned. Ah, that's good, sir. Family is everything, isn't it? I nodded. Yes, it is. But even as I said it, I wondered if Lena still believed that. By late afternoon, I returned to the hotel, hoping maybe Lena and Chris would be back. I checked my phone, no messages. The hallways were quiet, sunlit, filled with the faint smell of chlorine from the pool. I paused at their room 305 and raised my hand to knock. But then I heard laughter from inside. Lena's voice, light and carefree. The kind of laughter she hadn't shared with me all trip. Chris's voice followed, low and intimate. I stood there for a moment, frozen, feeling foolish. Then I lowered my hand and walked away. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. A man shouldn't feel like a guest in his own daughter's life. But that's exactly what I felt, like a visitor, tolerated out of duty. Dinner that night was even worse. They arrived late, still dressed in their golf clothes, faces glowing with sun and joy. I smiled as they sat down, pretending not to notice that they hadn't invited me to join them earlier. How was it? I asked gently. Great, Chris said, cutting into his steak. Lena even beat me on the 9th hole. I guess she learned from the best. Lena laughed, brushing her hair back. It was fun. You should have seen it, Dad. The place was beautiful. I wish I had, I said softly. She hesitated, just for a moment, but then looked away. Maybe next time. The conversation drifted to things I didn't understand. Stocks, social media followers, influencer deals. I nodded occasionally, though I had nothing to add. When the waiter brought the check, Chris didn't reach for it this time. He pushed it toward me with a grin. You've got this one, right, old man? Lena nudged him lightly. Chris, don't. What? He offered last night. Let him feel useful. The words stung more than I expected. I reached for my wallet anyway, my hand trembling slightly. Of course, I said. Dinner's on me. As I handed the waiter my card, I saw the pity in his eyes, that quiet, knowing look that made me want to disappear. Later that night, I walked along the beach. The sand was cool beneath my feet, and the sky was full of stars. I thought about the years I'd spent working late, missing birthdays, saving for Lena's education, for her future. I thought about the nights I'd stayed up with her when she was sick, the times I'd carried her on my shoulders when she was too tired to walk. And now, here I was walking alone, like a stranger, while she laughed somewhere inside that bright, warm hotel. It wasn't anger I felt, not yet. It was something deeper, disappointment, grief, the kind that doesn't make noise, just settles quietly inside your bones. I sat on a bench near the pier until the air turned cold. Then I went back to my room. The next morning there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Lena standing there, arms crossed, impatience in her eyes. Dad, can we talk? Of course. She stepped inside, looking around my room as if inspecting it. Listen, Chris's parents are coming tomorrow. Just for a day or two. It's kind of a surprise thing. I nodded slowly. That's nice. Yeah, but here's the thing, the hotel made a mistake. They overbooked. There aren't enough rooms. So we were thinking, she paused, biting her lip. Thinking what? That maybe you could, take a little break from the hotel for a night or two. Just while they're here, there's a nice guest house nearby. I already checked, it's cheap. For a second, I thought she was joking. You want me to leave? I said quietly. Not leave, Dad, just stay somewhere else for a night. It's only fair. Chris's parents are elderly, and they need the comfort. You're fine, right? I stared at her. The girl who used to beg me to tuck her in, who cried when I missed her school plays, who once told me I was her hero now stood in front of me, asking me to sleep elsewhere because her in-laws were more important. I'll manage, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Thank you, Dad. She smiled, relieved, and patted my arm like someone thanking a waiter. You're the best. When she left, I sat down on the bed, the silence heavy. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I looked out the window at the parking lot and thought of my late wife. You'd never believe this, love, I whispered in my mind. You'd never believe what she's become. That evening, Lena didn't invite me to dinner. I ate alone at a diner down the road, listening to the laughter of strangers. When I came back, I saw her through the glass lobby window surrounded by people, smiling, radiant. I wanted to walk in, to join them, but something held me back. Pride, maybe, dignity. So I turned away and walked toward the edge of the property, where the wind was colder and the sound of the sea drowned out my thoughts. That night, as I lay awake, I realized something painful. I wasn't part of her world anymore. I was just a shadow from her past, tolerated out of guilt, pushed aside when inconvenient. And though I didn't know it yet, the next day would take that humiliation even further. Because when morning came, and I stood at the front desk with my packed bag, ready to move into that guest house, I overheard something that froze me completely. The receptionist whispered to her coworker, glancing at my file, "That's the man the daughter made sleep outside, right?" Poor guy, some families have no shame. I didn't understand what she meant not yet, but I would. And when I did, the pain would cut deeper than anything I had ever felt before. The morning I packed my suitcase, I moved slower than usual, not from age, but from the weight pressing on my chest. Each folded shirt felt like a quiet admission of defeat. The small room that had started to feel like mine now looked empty, almost accusing. The hotel corridor outside was quiet. Only the faint hum of a vacuum echoed from somewhere down the hall. I rolled my suitcase toward the elevator, forcing myself not to think too much. At the reception, Lena was waiting arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her head, looking impatient. "Ready?" she asked, not meeting my eyes. I nodded. "You didn't have to come down." "It's fine. Chris's parents are already here. They're having lunch with us. I just wanted to make sure you're settled before they arrive." Her words were sharp in their politeness, the kind of tone people use when they want to seem caring but just want something done quickly. The receptionist smiled awkwardly. "Mr. Sanders, everything is arranged for you at the guest house. It's just a 5-minute walk down the road. Lovely garden view," they said. I managed a small smile. "Thank you." As I picked up my bag, Lena placed a hand on my arm. "Dad, please don't make this a big deal, okay? It's just for 2 nights." "I know," I said quietly. "Just 2 nights." She exhaled, relieved. "You're the best, really." Then she was gone, her heels clicking on the marble floor, her phone already pressed to her ear. I stood there for a moment, surrounded by the hum of the lobby, tourists laughing, luggage wheels rolling, soft piano music playing from hidden speakers. But none of it reached me. I felt invisible, like a ghost moving through a world that had already forgotten I existed. The guest house was small, but neat. White walls, wooden furniture, a faint smell of lavender in the air. The owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Clark, greeted me warmly. "Your daughter mentioned you'd be staying a few days. Welcome, Mr. Sanders. Make yourself at home." Her kindness almost undid me. "Thank you," I said softly. After unpacking, I sat by the window, watching the hotel from afar. I could see the balconies, hear faint laughter carried by the wind. Somewhere in that shining building, my daughter was entertaining her in-laws, pretending I didn't exist. I tried not to resent her. I told myself she was young, caught up in appearances, that she didn't mean harm. But deep inside, something had shifted, a quiet crack forming in the foundation of love I had built for decades. That evening, I received a text. "Dinner tonight. Hotel restaurant. Be there at 7. Lena." I stared at the message for a long time. No greeting, no warmth, just instructions. Still, I went. When I entered the restaurant, I saw them all seated at a long table, Lena and Chris at the center, his parents beside them. They looked elegant, wealthy, the kind of people who judged without saying a word. Lena smiled when she saw me, but it was strained. "Dad, you made it." I nodded and took the empty chair at the far end. Chris's father looked me up and down, his expression polite but disinterested. "So, you're Lena's father," he said in a deep voice. "Retired, are you?" "Yes," I replied. "I was an accountant for 35 years. "Ah," he said, as if the word itself bored him. "Numbers. My son's in real estate. Much more exciting." Chris chuckled proudly. Lena laughed along. I smiled faintly, feeling smaller with each passing minute. Dinner went on like that polite conversation that excluded me. Every time I tried to speak, someone interrupted. Every time I asked a question, I got half an answer. At one point, Chris's mother leaned toward Lena and whispered something. They both giggled. "What's funny?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Lena waved it off. "Oh, nothing, Dad. Just a private joke." Private? The word hit me harder than it should have. After dessert, as the group stood to leave, Chris clapped his hands. "All right, folks, let's head to the lounge for a drink." Lena turned to me. "Dad, you don't mind sitting this one out, do you? You look tired." I hesitated. "I'm fine." But she was already walking away. I watched them disappear. Into the crowd, laughing, glasses clinking, the soft glow of chandeliers above them. I stood there for a long time, then quietly left the hotel and walked back to the guest house through the dark streets. The next morning, I went for a walk on the beach. The sky was gray, the sea restless. I watched the waves crash and pull away, again and again, like they were trying to teach me something about letting go. When I returned, Mrs. Clark handed me a note. "A young lady dropped this off earlier," she said kindly. It was from Lena. "Dad, something came up. We're heading out with Chris's parents today. Please don't come to the hotel, it'll be too crowded. I'll call you tonight. Love. Lena." "Love," she wrote, but the word felt empty. I spent the day alone again, walking, reading, sitting by the window as rain began to fall. My phone stayed silent. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to return to the hotel, to see her face, to talk, to remind her that I was still here. When I reached the hotel, I saw them all standing near the entrance, laughing with drinks in hand. Chris was telling some story, his arms waving animatedly. Lena's face was lit with amusement. I stood by the sidewalk, unnoticed. Then Chris spotted me. His expression changed. Amusement turned to discomfort, then annoyance. "Hey," he called out, walking over. "What are you doing here?" "I just wanted to say hello," I said, my voice calm. Lena didn't answer my messages. He rubbed the back of his neck, glancing back at the group. "Yeah, listen. Tonight's kind of a family thing, you know? You understand, right?" "I am family," I said quietly. He sighed. "Look, man, don't make this awkward. She's under a lot of pressure with my parents. Let's not ruin the vibe, okay?" Before I could respond, Lena approached. Her smile was brittle, her eyes pleading silently. "Dad, please, can we talk later? Just go rest for now." "Lena," I said softly, "I came here for you. I just wanted—" "Dad!" she snapped, voice sharp. Heads turned. "Please don't make a scene." The words echoed louder than they should have. People nearby looked at us curious, judgmental. My throat tightened. "I didn't mean to embarrass you," I whispered. Her expression softened for a second, but then she turned away. "We'll talk later." And just like that, she walked back inside, leaving me standing there, an old man with nothing but a suitcase of memories and a heart too heavy to carry. I don't remember how long I stood outside that hotel. Long enough for the lights to blur in the drizzle, for the sound of laughter to fade into the ocean wind. When I finally returned to the guest house, soaked and shaking, Mrs. Clark met me at the door. "Oh dear, you're drenched. Come in, I'll get you a towel." I smiled weakly. "It's all right, just needed some air." But that night, lying awake, I replayed her words over and over. "Please, don't make a scene." It was something strangers said, not daughters. Something in me broke that night quietly, without sound. The kind of break that doesn't heal easily. The next morning, I didn't get a call. Not a text, nothing. By noon, I decided to walk to the hotel one last time, to say goodbye. But when I arrived, I found something I wasn't prepared for: the manager standing near the entrance, talking to Lena and Chris. Their faces looked tense, embarrassed. The manager turned when he saw me, his tone cautious. "Mr. Sanders, could I speak with you privately?" I frowned. "Of course." He led me aside, lowering his voice. "Sir, I'm very sorry, but your daughter requested that you not stay around the property anymore. She said it's causing tension with other guests." For a moment, I couldn't speak. "She said that?" He nodded uncomfortably. "I'm afraid so. She mentioned you'd be fine at the guest house." I looked past him at Lena, standing by the fountain, avoiding my gaze. Chris's arm was around her shoulders. And in that moment, I realized something brutal. It wasn't just that she didn't want me near her. She was ashamed of me. Her father, the man who had built her life from the ground up, who had given everything so she could stand where she stood now. I turned away, my throat burning. "Thank you for letting me know," I said quietly. And as I walked back toward the guest house, the weight of it all finally settled, cold, heavy, final. I didn't know what hurt more, being unwanted, or realizing I'd been replaced long ago. I didn't sleep that night. The sound of the sea outside the guest house window should have been calming, but it only reminded me of how close Lena was and yet how far she'd drifted. Every crash of the waves felt like her voice echoing in my memory, growing fainter each time. When dawn came, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. No messages, no calls. The last text from her, "Please don't make a scene," still glared back at me like a wound that wouldn't close. I told myself I'd leave quietly that morning. Pack my bag, check out, disappear. I was tired of being an inconvenience. But just as I zipped up my suitcase, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find the hotel manager, a tall, middle-aged man with kind eyes. His name tag read Mr. Harris. "Mr. Sanders?" he asked gently. "Do you have a moment?" I hesitated before nodding. "Of course. Please, come in." He stepped inside and glanced around the modest room before speaking. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by like this. I wanted to apologize for yesterday. The conversation we had in the lobby, it wasn't handled well. I could tell it upset you." I waved a hand, trying to sound calm. "It's all right, Mr. Harris, you were just doing your job." He shook his head. Still, it bothered me. I don't like seeing things like that family pushed apart over appearances. His words hung in the air. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. He continued softly. "I saw how your daughter spoke to you, sir, and I couldn't help noticing that isn't how someone treats a father." Something in my chest tightened. I tried to smile, but it came out crooked. "Families are complicated, Mr. Harris. Maybe she's just stressed." He nodded slowly, but didn't look convinced. "Perhaps. But there's something else. Would you mind coming with me for a moment? There's something you need to see." I frowned. "See?" "Yes," he said, his voice serious now. "Please, trust me." We walked together through the narrow lanes between the hotel and the guest house. The morning breeze carried the scent of salt and pine. When we reached the side entrance of the hotel, Mr. Harris led me toward the service corridor the one guests rarely saw. He paused by a small glass window overlooking the staff lounge. Inside, two housekeepers were talking quietly. I caught fragments of their words. That poor old man. Slept outside all night. His daughter told security not to let him in. My breath caught. Mr. Harris looked at me, his eyes full of quiet anger. That's what I wanted to confirm before speaking to you. Last night, around midnight, security told me an older man was seen sitting on one of the benches near the beach, no coat, just watching the waves. They thought you were a stranger who wandered onto the property. I found out later your daughter had told them not to let you back in. I stared at him, unable to speak. He went on, voice low but firm. She told the staff you were causing trouble. That you were unstable. I checked the reports myself. It wasn't just a misunderstanding, Mr. Sanders. She deliberately made sure you couldn't come back inside. The hallway spun around me for a moment. My knees felt weak. She said that about me? I whispered. He nodded. I'm sorry. I thought you should know. I leaned against the wall, breathing shallowly. All the small humiliations, the awkward silences, the distance, the way she avoided my gaze, they suddenly made sense. She hadn't just drifted away. She had erased me. Mr. Harris placed a hand on my shoulder. If you need a place to rest, we can arrange something better than this guest house. I have a private staff suite. You can stay there free of charge until you decide what you want to do. I looked at him, my eyes stinging. Why are you doing this for me? He smiled sadly. Because I had a father too. And before he died, he told me something I never forgot. Don't let the world make you forget your worth. I see too many people doing that. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of warmth in my chest. Thank you, I said quietly. But I can't stay where I'm not wanted. I'll leave tomorrow. I just need to understand why she's doing this. He nodded. Then let me help you find out. That afternoon, I sat in the cafe across the street from the hotel, watching from behind a newspaper. Mr. Harris had agreed to keep an eye on things inside and update me later. I felt foolish, like some old man chasing ghosts, but the truth had become something I couldn't ignore. After an hour, I saw them, Lena and Chris, walking out of the hotel with an older couple. Chris's parents. They looked happy, carefree, like nothing in the world was wrong. Lena was laughing, holding onto her mother-in-law's arm as if she were her own. And then I saw it the way she introduced them to the hotel staff, smiling proudly. These are my parents, she said. Not in-laws. Parents. The words hit me like a physical blow. The receptionist smiled and greeted them warmly. Chris placed a hand on Lena's back, proud and possessive. They walked past me without noticing, without even glancing my way. My fingers trembled around the edge of the newspaper. The letters blurred. She had replaced me. In her world, in her story, I no longer existed. That night, I met Mr. Harris again in his office. The room was dimly lit, smelling faintly of coffee and old paper. He handed me a folder. I did some checking, he said quietly. You were right to feel something was off. Inside were receipts, copies of transactions, and room records. My name was listed for a single night's stay, but all other charges, including the ones Lena had promised were on her, were billed under my card. She's been using your information to pay for everything, he said grimly. She told the front desk you insisted. Even upgraded their suite with your account. My throat went dry. Why? Why would she do that? He looked down. Because she can. Because she thinks you won't fight back. I sank into the chair, my hands trembling. Memories of her childhood flooded back, teaching her to ride a bike, staying up all night helping her with school projects, the day she cried at her wedding because she was afraid of leaving me. How did that girl become this woman? Mr. Harris sighed. I don't know your full story, sir. But I can tell you this, you deserve better. You have a good heart. Don't let them walk all over it. I nodded slowly. I won't, not anymore. Later that evening, I walked down to the beach again. The sand was cold under my shoes, the tide rising. I watched the hotel lights shimmer in the distance, gold against the dark sea. For a moment, I thought I saw Lena's silhouette on the balcony laughing, holding a glass of wine. I wondered if she ever thought of me, if even a flicker of guilt crossed her mind. Probably not. I sat on a rock, the wind biting my face, and whispered into the night. You took everything I gave, Lena. My love, my pride, my trust. but you won't take my dignity." I didn't know what justice would look like yet, only that it was coming. And strangely, I didn't feel weak anymore. The humiliation had burned something out of me, the need for her approval, the desperate hope that she'd love me again. What was left was quiet strength. When I stood up to leave, I saw Mr. Harris waiting by the boardwalk, a knowing smile on his face. "You're planning something, aren't you?" he said. I looked back at the glowing hotel and nodded. No one should get away with making their father feel like less than a man. He extended his hand. "Then let's make sure they don't." For the first time in years, I smiled, not with sadness but with resolve. Because for the first time, I wasn't the helpless father begging for love. I was a man reclaiming his worth, and though I didn't know it yet, the justice that would follow the truth that would unfold would shake my daughter's perfect world to its very foundation. I woke before sunrise the next morning, not because I wanted to, but because sleep wouldn't come. My mind was racing scenes of my daughter's laughter, the sound of Chris's voice calling me "old man," the cold look in Lena's eyes. I stood by the window of the guest house and watched the horizon slowly come alive. The world outside was beautiful, calm, peaceful, untouched. It was strange how nature could remain so still while my heart felt like it was breaking apart inside my chest. I poured myself a cup of bitter coffee, sat at the small wooden desk, and opened my old leather wallet. Inside was a faded photo Lena at 10 years old, her arms wrapped around my neck after her first school play. I still remembered that day vividly. She had been nervous before going on stage, and I had told her, "No matter what happens, I'll be right here watching you." She had looked up at me and said, "Promise, Dad." And I had promised. Now, staring at that picture, I realized I had kept my word. I had always been there. It was she who had walked away. A soft knock at the door broke my thoughts. I opened it to find Mr. Harris holding 2 paper cups of coffee and a brown envelope under his arm. "Morning, Mr. Sanders," he greeted kindly. "Didn't think you'd be awake this early." "I haven't really been sleeping," I admitted. He handed me one of the cups. "Then this might help, and I think you'll want to see this." He placed the envelope on the desk and sat down opposite me. His eyes were sharp now, not the gentle hotel manager's gaze, but that of a man on a mission. "What's in there?" I asked. "Proof," he said. I checked the records again after our conversation, and I found something odd. He opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of Papers Hotel invoices, payment records, and a few photocopied receipts. "Lena didn't just use your credit card for this vacation," he explained. "She's been using your card for months. Bookings, dinners, spa packages, all under your name. She must have saved your information somewhere." I blinked in disbelief. "Months?" He nodded. I cross-checked dates. Some of these transactions go back half a year. "She's been living on your money, Mr. Sanders." I leaned back, my hands trembling slightly. "But why?" "She has a good job, a husband who earns well. Because some people," he said slowly, "don't want comfort, they want control. Maybe she doesn't care about the money. Maybe she cares about reminding herself that she can take from you, that she's in charge now." The thought twisted like a knife inside me. My daughter, the same little girl who used to save her pocket money to buy me Father's Day gifts, had turned my love into a tool of humiliation. Mr. Harris placed the last page on the desk. "Here's the worst part. The suite she's staying in now, it was originally booked in your name. She told the hotel staff she was helping you plan a surprise family vacation. Then she switched the booking right before you arrived, left you in the smallest room available." My chest felt heavy, but anger was starting to replace the pain. "She planned this," I murmured. "All of it." "She did," he confirmed. "And I think she underestimated you." We sat in silence for a few moments. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Finally, Mr. Harris leaned forward. "Do you want to expose her?" I looked up at him sharply. "Expose her?" He nodded. "There's a staff dinner tomorrow, a semi-formal event. The management, senior guests, and a few VIPs are attending. Your daughter and her husband are on the list. If you wanted, we could make sure the truth comes out in a way she'll never forget." I hesitated. "You're suggesting public humiliation?" He shrugged slightly. "I'm suggesting justice. But that's up to you. I looked down at the papers again, every transaction, every date, every small act of betrayal. I thought of the night I sat on that bench, shivering, while she slept under warm lights paid for with my name. Yes, I wanted justice, but not the loud, cruel kind. I wanted her to feel what I had felt, that quiet, hollow ache when you realize someone you love has turned you into nothing. "No," I said finally. "Not yet. If I confront her now, she'll deny everything. She'll twist it around. I know her, she's clever." Mr. Harris nodded thoughtfully. "Then what will you do?" "I'll let her show her true colors," I said. "But this time, people will be watching." That evening, I decided to see her not as a father begging for affection, but as a man observing a stranger. I walked to the hotel restaurant around sunset. The glass walls glowed with the orange light of the setting sun. Inside, Lena and Chris were seated at a corner table, laughing with a small group of guests. I stayed out of sight near the entrance, watching. Chris looked smug, his arm draped around her shoulder. Lena was wearing an elegant dress, her hair tied up the way her mother used to. She looked radiant, confident, happy, untouchable. And then I saw it, the waiter handed her a check. She smiled, glanced at it, and signed with my full name, Daniel Sanders. I felt something cold and steady settle inside me. That was all the proof I needed. I took a deep breath and walked away before anyone saw me. Back at the guest house, Mr. Harris was waiting for me with his laptop open. "I've been thinking," he said. "If we can show the right people what she's been doing, the management, maybe even her husband, you won't have to say a word. The facts will speak for themselves." I frowned. "Chris, you think he doesn't know?" "I don't think he does," Harris replied. "His name never shows up on the transactions. Every single booking, every upgrade, all under yours. If he knew, he wouldn't risk his image like that. He's the kind who cares too much about reputation." That gave me pause. If Chris didn't know, then maybe the humiliation would cut even deeper, not from me, but from his reaction when the truth surfaced. Mr. Harris turned the screen toward me. "Here," he said. I compiled a file. Receipts, timestamps, account links, all organized. We'll email it anonymously to the hotel management before tomorrow's dinner. They'll handle the rest. I stared at the folder. My name sat on the screen like a brand proof of every stolen dollar, every lie. "This isn't just about money anymore," I murmured. "It's about who she's become." The next day passed slowly. I tried reading, walking along the shore, even taking short naps, but my mind kept replaying old memories. Lena on my shoulders at the zoo. Lena crying when she lost her first tooth. Lena telling me I was her hero. When had that love turned to contempt? By evening, the sky was streaked with crimson. I dressed carefully clean shirt, pressed slacks, polished shoes. I looked at myself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the man staring back. He looked older, yes, but stronger too. Mr. Harris met me in the lobby, dressed in a neat suit. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." We entered the ballroom together. The place was filled with warm light, soft music, and laughter. Guests mingled, holding glasses of wine. I stayed near the back, unnoticed. Then I saw her, Lena, walking in with Chris, smiling proudly, greeting people like she belonged there. Moments later, one of the hotel executives walked up to her, holding a printed folder. I recognized it instantly, the one Mr. Harris had sent. "Mrs. Coleman," the man said politely, "may I have a word?" Her smile faltered. She followed him a few steps away. Their conversation was brief, but I saw her expression shift: confusion, then fear, then anger. Chris noticed too and hurried over. "What's going on?" he asked. Lena tried to explain, her hands trembling slightly, but the manager gestured toward the receipts. The crowd's chatter softened. People were beginning to notice. I stood silently, watching from a distance as Chris's face turned pale. He looked at her with disbelief, then something like disgust. He grabbed the folder, skimmed through it, and threw it onto the table. The sound of paper hitting glass cut through the room like a crack of thunder. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Chris turned to her, his voice loud and sharp. "You used his money? Your father's? You told me he insisted." Lena's lips quivered. It wasn't like that." "Don't," he snapped. "Don't lie to me again." And then he walked away, leaving her standing there pale, trembling, surrounded by whispers. I could have stepped forward. I could have told her everything, that I was the one who exposed her, that this was my justice. But I didn't. I turned quietly and left the ballroom, Mr. Harris walking beside me. Outside, the night air felt clean, cool, and free. "She'll know it was you," Harris said quietly. "Maybe," I replied. "But I don't need her to say it. I just needed her to feel it." He nodded approvingly. As we walked toward the beach, the sound of the ocean rose around us again. I stopped and looked up at the stars. "She took everything I gave," I said softly. "But tonight I took back my peace." Mr. Harris smiled. "You did, Mr. Sanders, you did." And for the first time since that awful night, I finally felt the weight lift off my heart. After the dinner, I walked for a long time along the dark beach road, letting the sea breeze wipe the tension from my face. Each wave came and went like a heartbeat, soft and steady, reminding me that life moves on no matter who betrays you. That night, I slept without nightmares for the first time since arriving at the resort. No voices, no guilt. Just the hum of the ocean outside and a strange calmness in my chest. When I woke, sunlight streamed through the curtains. I dressed, made some tea, and sat quietly by the window. I wasn't sure what the day would bring. Part of me wanted to leave to put this painful trip behind me, but another part whispered that it wasn't over yet. Not completely. At 9 sharp, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Mr. Harris was there again, only this time. He looked uneasy. "Morning," he greeted. "Mind if I come in?" I gestured for him to enter. "Of course. What's wrong?" He closed the door behind him and sighed. "Your daughter came to see me this morning." My stomach tightened. "Lena?" He nodded. "She looked shaken. Said she needed to speak to you." I froze. "Did she say why?" "She didn't explain much. But she was crying, Mr. Sanders. Not angry, not defensive crying. She's waiting by the boardwalk right now." I looked out the window at the glimmering stretch of sand and water. My first instinct was to say no, to tell Harris I was done, that I didn't owe her anything anymore. But something inside me, that stubborn part of a father that refuses to die, told me to go. "All right," I said quietly. "I'll see her." When I reached the boardwalk, she was sitting on one of the benches facing the sea. Her once elegant dress was wrinkled, her hair undone, her eyes red and swollen. For a long moment, I stood a few feet away, unsure how to begin. Then she turned, saw me, and froze. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice trembled, breaking through years of walls. I walked closer, my steps slow, deliberate. "Lena!" She looked down, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I suppose you know everything now?" "I do," I said evenly. Silence. Only the sound of the wind and the sea between us. Then, without warning, tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I don't even know what's wrong with me anymore." I watched her for a moment, emotions clashing inside me. Anger, pity, love, all tangled together. "Why, Lena? Why would you do that to me? To us?" She took a shaky breath. "When Mom died, everything changed. I was angry. At life. At you. You buried yourself in work and told me to be strong. But I didn't want to be strong. I wanted you to notice me, to grieve with me." Her voice broke again. "And then, when I married Chris, I thought maybe I'd finally have control over something in my life. But I didn't. His family looked down on me, said I came from nothing. They made me feel small, like I had no class, no worth. So I lied. I made myself look successful. I told them you were wealthy, that I grew up in comfort. I used your card because it helped keep that lie alive." I stood still, the confession burning through me. She looked up at me, desperate. "I never meant to hurt you, Dad. I swear. I just didn't want them to see how poor we were after Mom died." I shook my head slowly. "We weren't poor, Lena. We were just broken. There's a difference." She buried her face in her hands. "I know, and I ruined everything." For a long while, I said nothing. I just looked at her, my little girl, now a grown woman, lost in her own shame. The truth was painful, but it was human. It didn't excuse what she did, but it explained what I couldn't before. Finally, I sat down beside her. "You hurt me," I said softly. "You took something sacred trust and treated it like a credit line. But you're still my daughter. I can't erase that." She lifted her eyes to me, surprised. "You're not angry anymore?" "Oh, I'm angry," I admitted. But anger fades. What doesn't fade is disappointment and hope. Because even now, I still hope you'll find your way back. She bit her lip, tears flowing again. "Chris left me," she whispered. "He packed his bags this morning. He said he can't be married to someone who lies so easily." I nodded slowly. "Then maybe this is your chance to start over. To be honest, finally. Not for him, not for me, for yourself." She reached out, hesitated, and then placed her hand over mine. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Maybe not," I said quietly. "But forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about choosing peace over poison." For a long time, we just sat there. The waves kept coming and going, washing the shore clean as if reminding us both that even broken things could start anew. Later that day, I met Mr. Harris again. He stood by the hotel's garden entrance, watching guests check out. "How did it go?" he asked. I took a deep breath. It went better than I expected, worse than I hoped. He smiled knowingly. "That's usually how healing works." "She told me the truth," I said. "All of it. Why she did it. And I forgave her." He nodded slowly. "You're a stronger man than most." I smiled faintly. "No, just a tired father who wants to stop carrying bitterness." We stood together for a while, watching the sun dip lower. Then I turned to him and said, "Mr. Harris, you've done more for me than anyone in a long time. You helped me when you didn't have to. Let me repay you somehow." He shook his head. "No need, Mr. Sanders, I didn't help you for repayment. I helped because I saw a man who deserved to be treated with dignity." I looked at him thoughtfully. "Then at least allow me to do one thing. You said this hotel's ownership was considering layoffs, right?" He looked surprised. "Yes, how did you?" I smiled. "Let's just say I made a few calls this morning. A friend of mine from my old firm has a property investment branch. They're always looking for good management partners. I told them about you, about your integrity." He stared at me, speechless. "You didn't have to." "I did," I interrupted gently. "You reminded me who I was. It's time I did the same for someone else." For the first time since we'd met, I saw Mr. Harris's eyes shine. He extended his hand. "Thank you, sir." "Call me Daniel," I said, shaking his hand. The next morning, I packed my suitcase again. But this time, I didn't feel like I was running away. I felt like I was leaving behind a ghost that had haunted me long enough. Lena came to see me off. She stood by the taxi, her eyes still red but her face calm. "Where will you go?" she asked quietly. "Home," I said. "There's a lot waiting for me there. Maybe a few things I forgot to finish." She nodded. "I'll call you." "If that's okay." "I'd like that," I replied. She hesitated before hugging me, not the tight, childish hug of years ago, but a fragile, grown-up one. Still, it was enough. As I got into the taxi, I looked back one last time. She was standing there, arms crossed against the wind, watching me leave with something like regret, maybe even respect. And for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. The drive back to the airport was long and quiet. I watched the landscape roll by palm trees, sunlight on the water, the faint outline of the resort fading in the distance. Mr. Harris had been right. Justice wasn't always about revenge. Sometimes it was about reclaiming your dignity in silence, about standing tall when others expect you to bow. When the taxi stopped at the terminal, I paid the driver and took one last look at the horizon. Somewhere behind me, my daughter was rebuilding her life. Somewhere ahead, mine was waiting to begin again. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "You did the right thing." And as the plane lifted off into the clouds, I realized the truth that had taken me years to see. You can't control what others do with your love, but you can decide whether their betrayal defines who you are. That, I thought, was the real victory. The flight home felt longer than it should have. Not because of the distance, but because of the silence. As the plane cruised above the clouds, I looked out of the window, watching the golden sunlight scatter across the wings. The world below looked peaceful, small, and detached, so unlike the storm that had been raging in my heart for weeks. Somewhere behind me, at that coastal resort, a chapter of my life had closed. Lena's tears, her confession, the humiliation I'd endured, all of it had left scars I knew would never fully fade. But for the first time, those scars didn't feel like open wounds. They felt like lessons. When the plane landed and I stepped back into the familiar air of home, I realized how much I had missed it, the smell of old wood from the porch, the hum of the town, even the way the light fell differently through my kitchen window. Home, quiet, honest, the kind of peace no amount of luxury could buy. I spent the first few days alone, doing simple things, cleaning the garden, fixing the old swing that Lena used to play on, cooking small meals just for myself. It felt strange at first, the silence in the house, the absence of voices. But in that silence, I found something I hadn't had in a long time: clarity. I started going through old boxes in the attic, things I hadn't touched since my wife passed away. Her clothes still smelled faintly of lavender, her letters, her laughter frozen in photographs. And then, in one small box, I found something that stopped me cold: a handwritten note from my wife, addressed to Lena. It was dated the week before she died. The paper was folded neatly, the ink faded with time. I hesitated before opening it, afraid of what I might find. "My sweet Lena," it began, "if you're reading this, it means your father and I couldn't protect you from everything we wanted to. But I need you to remember this. Your father loves you more than his own breath. When I'm gone, don't shut him out. He'll grieve in silence. You'll think he doesn't care, but he does. He just doesn't know how to show pain, only how to carry it. So promise me, don't let that silence turn into distance." I sat there, frozen, the words blurring through tears. She had known. Even in her final days, she had seen what might happen, the cracks that could grow between Lena and me if grief took hold of us in different ways. And somehow, it had played out exactly as she feared. I folded the letter gently and placed it in my jacket pocket. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it yet, but I knew it needed to reach Lena. Maybe it would help her understand and heal. A week passed. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, my phone buzzed. A message from Lena. "Dad, can we talk?" My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment before I replied. "Of course." She called a few minutes later. Her voice was soft, careful. "I just wanted to tell you, I got a new job at a local accounting firm. Nothing fancy, but it's honest work." "That's good," I said, smiling faintly. "I'm proud of you." There was a pause. I also paid off the hotel charges. Every last cent. I sold a few of my things. It doesn't erase what I did, but I didn't want to owe you any more. Her words carried both shame and strength, and I realized that maybe she truly was trying to change. "I never wanted repayment," I told her. "I only wanted you to remember who you are." "I'm trying," she said. Her voice trembled slightly. "I really am, Dad." "I know," I said quietly, "and I believe you." Before hanging up, I said, "There's something I want to show you soon. Something from your mother." She didn't answer at first, then whispered, "I'd like that." The next weekend, she came to visit. She looked different, simpler, more grounded. No expensive jewelry, no designer clothes, just a plain blouse and jeans. When she stepped onto the porch, there was a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. I realized she hadn't been home in nearly 2 years. "Smells the same," she murmured softly. "Like pine and coffee." I smiled faintly. "Some things don't change." She followed me inside. The house felt warmer that day, alive again. Over lunch, we talked about small things: her new job, the coworkers she liked, how she was saving to get her own apartment. I could see she was rebuilding herself, piece by fragile piece. After we ate, I handed her the letter. "Your mother wrote this. I think it's time you read it." Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper. I watched as her eyes scanned the words and then filled with tears. "She knew," Lena whispered. "She knew we'd drift apart." "She did," I said gently, "but she also knew we'd find our way back." She believed in that. Lena pressed the letter to her chest, her shoulders shaking. "I miss her so much." "So do I," I said. "But she's still with us, in how we forgive, in how we move forward." She nodded, tears falling freely now. "I'll never be able to undo what I did, Dad. But I promise from now on, I'll live in a way Mom would be proud of. That's all I've ever wanted. We sat there for a while in silence, just holding on to the memory of the woman who had once held us both together. As weeks turned into months, our relationship slowly mended. Not perfectly, not instantly, but in quiet, genuine ways. She started visiting every Sunday. Sometimes she'd bring groceries, sometimes just coffee. We'd sit on the porch and talk about everything: work, neighbors, life. The guilt in her eyes softened over time, replaced by a humble kind of peace. One Sunday morning, she said something that stayed with me. "You know, Dad, I used to think love was about how much you could get from someone. But now I see it's about how much you can give without losing yourself." I looked at her, proud and a little emotional. "That's a lesson most people take a lifetime to learn." She smiled faintly. I had a good teacher. A few months later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from the hotel from Mr. Harris. He wrote that the ownership had indeed partnered with my contact. The resort was thriving, and he'd been promoted to regional manager. At the end of his letter, he wrote, "You once said justice isn't about revenge, it's about reclaiming your dignity. I wanted you to know you helped me reclaim mine, too. Thank you, Daniel." I folded the letter with a smile. That simple act of kindness helping someone else rise had closed a circle for me. In helping Harris, I'd finally helped myself. On a quiet spring afternoon, I walked to the local park, the one where Lena used to ride her bike as a child. She joined me there, sitting beside me on the bench, just like old times. The trees rustled softly, sunlight filtering through the leaves. "You know," she said, "I was thinking of going back to school. Maybe get a degree in social work. Help people who lose their way like I did." I smiled. "That sounds like something your mother would have loved." She laughed quietly. "Yeah, she'd probably say, 'It's about time you stopped running, young lady, Asok.'" We both chuckled. Then she looked at me and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me, Dad." I looked out at the pond, watching a pair of ducks glide across the water. "You're my daughter," I said softly. "That's not something you give up on. Ever." As the sun dipped low, painting the sky with gold and rose, I realized how far we'd come. The pain, the humiliation, the betrayal, they were real. But so was the forgiveness that followed. Lena leaned her head on my shoulder, just as she used to when she was little. For the first time in years, it didn't feel forced or broken. It felt right. In that quiet moment, I whispered to myself the truth I had learned the hard way. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about coming back even after you've been lost. The world didn't owe me justice, but I had found something better: peace. And as the evening light faded, I knew my story. Our story wasn't one of betrayal anymore. It was one of redemption. Months had passed since that day in the park. Life had finally begun to breathe again, slow, steady, and full of small, quiet moments that once went unnoticed. The house didn't feel empty anymore. Every corner carried warmth: the hum of the coffee maker in the morning, the creak of the wooden floor under my feet, the laughter that sometimes echoed when Lena came over. She had truly changed. Gone were the days of expensive handbags and empty pride. She now wore simplicity, like a crown-clean shirts, modest jewelry, and a calmness in her eyes that came from learning, not from running. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, she came by carrying a small box. "I wanted to show you something," she said. I sat down beside her on the porch steps. Inside the box were papers, brochures, forms, and a handwritten note. "I got accepted," she said, smiling with a mix of pride and disbelief, "into a social work program at the university. Evening classes. I start next week." I looked at her, a swell of emotion rising in my chest. "That's wonderful, Lena. Your mother would have been proud." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "That's all I've been thinking about. Making her proud." As she began her studies, I noticed something remarkable in her: a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. She started volunteering at a community center, helping single parents and troubled teens find jobs or education paths. Sometimes she'd tell me about the people she met. "There was this girl, Dad," she once said over dinner. "She ran away from home. Her mother kicked her out for getting pregnant. I helped her find a shelter. It felt good, like I was finally doing something that mattered." I smiled quietly. "You're helping people find what you almost lost: dignity." She nodded, tears threatening to spill. And maybe, in some way, I'm helping that version of me too. Meanwhile, I had started teaching part-time at the local business school, mentoring young adults on ethics and leadership. It wasn't about money. It was about purpose. When I told Lena, she laughed softly. "You teaching ethics? That fits perfectly. Someone has to remind the next generation that success without integrity isn't success at all," I said with a grin. One evening, we were both sitting in the living room, sipping tea. The air was filled with the scent of jasmine, Lena's favorite. "Dad," she said after a long pause, "do you ever regret forgiving me?" Her question caught me off guard. "No," I said firmly. "If I hadn't forgiven you, I'd still be living in anger. And anger destroys the one who holds it, not the one it's aimed at." She looked down, fiddling with her cup. "Sometimes I still feel like I don't deserve it." I reached across the table and placed my hand on hers. "Then earn it every day, through the way you live. That's how forgiveness becomes real." She nodded slowly, understanding. Months later, the community center where Lena volunteered invited me to speak at their annual event. The director told me Lena had nominated me as someone who taught her the meaning of second chances. Standing before that crowd, teachers, parents, young people, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Quiet pride. When I spoke, I didn't talk about betrayal or pain. I spoke about the strength of starting over. "Sometimes," I said, "life breaks us not to destroy us but to make room for something better. The people who hurt us or whom we hurt are part of that breaking. But if we learn, if we forgive, then the story changes from tragedy to redemption." When I stepped off the stage, Lena hugged me tightly. "You were amazing," she whispered. "So were you," I said. "You're the proof of what I was talking about." A few weeks later, she came home with a small framed photo. It was from her graduation from the first semester, a milestone she had earned through sweat and humility. In the picture, she stood beside her classmates, holding her certificate, smiling brightly. She placed the photo on the mantel next to one of her mother. "I want her to see this," she said softly. I looked at the two photos side by side, mother and daughter, and felt a deep peace settle in my heart. On a warm summer morning, I found myself sitting by the lake again, the same one where I used to take Lena fishing when she was little. She joined me with 2 cups of coffee. We sat quietly, watching the water shimmer under the rising sun. "Dad," she said after a while, "do you ever think about what life could have been like if Mom were still here?" "Every day," I said. "But I think she's watching us now and smiling." Lena leaned against my shoulder. "I hope so. I want to believe she knows we finally made it right." I looked at her. The woman, my little girl, had become flawed, tested, but reborn. "We did," I whispered, "and that's all that matters." When she left that afternoon, I stood on the porch watching her drive away, sunlight glinting off her car. For the first time, I didn't feel the ache of loss. I felt gratitude. She had found herself again not through comfort, but through courage. And I had found peace not through revenge, but through forgiveness. As I turned back into the house, I caught sight of her mother's letter, still framed on the mantel. I read the words once more, my heart swelling with quiet pride. "Promise me, don't let silence turn into distance." We hadn't. We had turned silence into understanding, distance into love, and mistakes into lessons that would outlive both of us. That evening, I wrote something in my old journal, something I knew I'd want Lena to read one day. Life doesn't test you through strangers. It tests you through the people you love most. The question is not how deeply they hurt you, but how bravely you choose to heal. I closed the book, feeling the weight of peace real, earned, unshakable peace. And as dusk settled over the horizon, I whispered a quiet prayer for my daughter, for my wife, and for the man I had become through it all. The year turned quietly, the seasons folding into one another like pages in a book I had learned to read with patience. Spring brought soft rains and the scent of earth. Summer carried laughter and the hum of cicadas. By autumn, the air was cooler, gentler, and so was my heart. Lena had moved into her own apartment by then. A modest place, filled with light and plants she kept by the window. She'd visit every Sunday without fail, sometimes bringing home-cooked food, sometimes just her stories. Her life was no longer defined by what she had lost, but by what she was building. And watching her rebuild herself was like watching dawn return after a long, endless night. One crisp afternoon, as I sat on the porch reading, she arrived unannounced, a small envelope in her hand and a nervous smile on her face. "I wanted to give you this in person," she said. Inside the envelope was a letter of acceptance, not to school this time, but to a foundation she'd applied to join. "They help victims of family estrangement and emotional abuse," she explained. "They offered me a full-time position." I read the letter twice, my eyes stinging. "Lena, this is incredible." She smiled, her voice trembling. "I wouldn't have had the strength to do this without you, Dad. You showed me what forgiveness looks like, what dignity feels like." I shook my head softly. "No, Lena, you showed me what redemption looks like." For a long time, neither of us said anything. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful, the kind that exists between people who finally understand each other without words. A few days later, I visited the cemetery. It had been years since I last stood by my wife's grave without bitterness in my heart. I brought fresh white lilies, her favorite, and knelt beside the stone. "Lena's doing well," I said quietly. "She's finally found her way. You'd be proud of her." The wind brushed through the trees, soft and warm. I took it as her answer. I sat there for a while, just thinking about life, about mistakes, about how the heart finds strange ways to heal itself. When I stood up to leave, I placed my hand on the stone one last time. "You were right," I whispered. "Love doesn't end. It just changes form." That evening, I returned home to find Lena sitting on the porch steps, waiting for me. She had 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for her. "You went to see Mom, didn't you?" she asked. I nodded. I told her everything. "She'd be proud of you." She looked out toward the horizon, the sunset spilling gold across her face. "I miss her every day." "So do I said softly. "But I think she's here in how we've learned to forgive, to keep going." Lena smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what love really is. Not just the good moments, but surviving the bad ones too." I chuckled. "You've grown wiser than me." She leaned against my shoulder. "You taught me how to survive, Dad. I just finally learned how to live." As the weeks passed, I watched her flourish. She began holding workshops at the foundation, helping others reconcile with their families. Her story, once a wound, had become a light for others lost in their own storms. Sometimes people would stop me in town. "You're Lena's father, aren't you?" They'd say, "She helped my daughter. She gave her hope." Each time I'd smile quietly, my chest swelling with pride. It wasn't revenge that had brought me peace. It was this, watching the person who once hurt me become the person I had always hoped she'd be. One late evening, I sat at my desk writing. My hands trembled a little now, age had begun to show its quiet hand. But my mind felt clear and my heart steady. I was writing a letter not for anyone in particular, but for some day when I wouldn't be around. "Lena," I wrote, "if you ever read this, I want you to remember something. The world will hurt you. Sometimes even the people you love will break your heart. But never let pain turn you cruel. Hold on to kindness, even when it feels undeserved. Because kindness, my dear, is the truest form of strength." I sealed the letter and placed it inside my journal, next to the note from her mother. Side by side, one generation teaching another. A few nights later, I had a dream. I was standing by the lake again, the same one from my youth, still and silver beneath the moonlight. My wife stood on the opposite shore, smiling softly, waving. Beside her was Lena as a child, laughing, calling out to me. When I woke, I found tears on my face, but they weren't sad tears. They were peaceful. For the first time in my life, I felt whole. Lena visited the next morning, just as she always did. She found me on the porch, dozing in my chair, the sunrise spilling light across my face. I didn't wake when she called my name, not right away. When she realized I was gone, she didn't cry loudly. She simply sat beside me, held my hand, and whispered, "Rest now, Dad. You've done enough." And in that moment, as the morning breeze carried the scent of jasmine and sunlight, there was no tragedy, only peace. Weeks later, at the memorial, people came from all over, colleagues, neighbors, students, even strangers I'd once helped. But it was Lena's words that carried the day. Standing before the crowd, she said, My father taught me that dignity is not something people give you. It's something you hold on to even when the world tries to take it away. He forgave me when I didn't deserve it. And because of that, I learned what real strength is. Not power, not pride, but mercy. Her voice trembled, but she didn't break. She looked up at the sky and smiled through her tears. He didn't just teach me how to live. He taught me how to love without fear, without pride, without conditions. After the ceremony, she returned home, sat on the same porch we used to share, and opened my journal. She found the letter I'd written, the one I'd left for her. She read every word slowly, tears falling silently down her cheeks. Then closing the journal, she whispered, "I'll make you proud, Dad, every day." And with that, she stood up, took a deep breath, and walked into a new day carrying with her everything I had ever wanted her to know. Because in the end, the story wasn't about betrayal. It was about what comes after the courage to rebuild, the grace to forgive, and the love that endures even after goodbye. And somewhere beyond the clouds, I like to think her mother and I watched her smiling, proud, and at peace. Dignity isn't lost when others betray you. It's lost when you stop believing in love, forgiveness, and family. Hold on to them, even through pain. They're what make you whole again.